700,000 people, I feel that I have to scream out in protest as to what's happening to the country and my constituents. There has to be some way for me in a parliamentary way, without violating the House rules, to express myself.
The chair is following guidelines on appropriate unanimous consent requests.
With all due respect, that has nothing to do with my parliamentary inquiry. Nothing at all.
Under the
rules for unanimous consent doesn't have anything to do with a parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman is engaging in debate. Does the gentleman have a unanimous consent request?
Are you saying that you're ignoring my parliamentary inquiry? I'm just asking.
The gentleman has not made a parliamentary inquiry.
That's how I started, and I could ask the recorder, but I don't want to waste a lot of time on this weekend legislative session. But I started asking permission to make a parliamentary inquiry, and that was granted. And
the gentleman will suspend. Under guidelines consistently issued by successive speakers, as recorded in Section 956 of the House Rules and Manual, the chair is constrained not to entertain the request unless it has been cleared by the bipartisan floor and committee leaderships.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want to prolong this, but aren't you talking about a unanimous consent request?
Yes.
Well, I'm talking about a parliamentary inquiry. If you tell me I'm out of order for making a parliamentary inquiry, I'm not prepared to challenge the chair, even though I truly believe that you and I know you will be incorrect.
The gentleman has not stated a proper parliamentary inquiry.
I asked, well, how do you state it properly? I asked, how could I properly state the feelings of my constituent as a member of this august body in a parliamentary way? What could be more parliamentary than that?
The gentleman may be yielded to for debate. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Oh, so the parliamentary inquiry is not going to be recognized.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Okay, I accept that.
Mr. Speaker, I had yielded to the gentleman from New York for a unanimous consent request. If the gentleman has a unanimous consent request.
I ask the unanimous consent that the Speaker and the parliamentarian take a good look at the rules of this House so that members can protest the closing down of the United States government.
The gentleman has not made a proper parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker,
the gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at this time, I would like to yield for the purpose of a unanimous consent request to the gentlelady from California, Ms. Capps.
I thank my colleague for yielding. Honorable Speaker, I am pleased to join with my colleagues asking unanimous consent that this body in which we serve, the House of Representatives, bring up the Senate amendment to the H.J. the House Joint Resolution 59, to open the government and go to conference on a budget so that we may end this Republican government shutdown.
As the chair has previously advised, that request cannot be entertained absent appropriate clearance. Gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield to the gentleman from Minnesota for the purpose of a unanimous consent request. Mr. Nolan.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the House bring up the Senate amendment to House Resolution 59 to open the government and to go to conference on a budget so that we can end this Republican government shutdown so hurtful and harmful to the American people.
In a row. As the chair previously advised, that request cannot be entertained absent appropriate clearance. Pursuant to Clause 1C of Rule 19, further consideration of House Joint Resolution 80 is postponed. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, proceedings will resume on the question previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. House Resolution 378, The motion to instruct on H.R. 2642. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. The unfinished business is the vote on the adoption of House Resolution 378, on which the yeas and nays were ordered.
Mr. Speaker,
the title of the resolution.
Expressing the sense of the House of Representatives regarding certain provisions of the Senate amendment to H.R. 2642 relating to the Secretary of Agriculture's administration of tariff rate quotas for raw and refined sugar.
The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
And the House in this morning debating the shutdown, taking up partial funding bills for the federal government, also working today on the Farm Bill, which includes food stamp programs and subsidies for farmers. I'll let you know as they start this vote that the Senate also in today. They'll be in about 25 minutes. That's 11 o'clock Eastern time. They're going to be voting on moving forward on the debt ceiling at 12 noon. Again, that's in the Senate. And we are going to be taking your phone calls here shortly. I want to let you know that Republicans can join us at 202-585-3885, Democrats 202-585-3886, and independents and others call 202-585-3887. We'll get the phone numbers up on the screen in a little bit, but while we're in this vote, let's take a look at what the House Democrats had to say earlier. They met earlier this morning.
Good morning. We are now in the 12th day of a government shutdown, and we are just a few days from risking the creditworthiness of our country. It is time to open up this government, get government workers back to work serving the American people. This morning, the members of the Democratic caucus, and we hope many members of the Republican caucus, will be walking through the House door this morning and signing a discharge petition. That discharge petition will make provisions for bringing to the floor a bill introduced by Republicans, which Mr. Van Hollen will further and Mr. Miller will further describe, which simply says we should not have a shutdown. But then we ought to act that way and not shut down the government. We have that opportunity to do it this morning. We're going to take that opportunity this morning. We hope our Republican colleagues will join us so that we can open up government this day. I now want to yield to George Miller, the ranking member of the Education and Labor Committee, who's been a leader on this effort. Mr. Miller?
Thank you very much, Cindy. In the next few minutes, the Democrats are going to file into the chambers of the House of Representatives to sign a petition to open the government. At the same time, we're calling upon those 20, 30 Republicans that have publicly stated that they want to open the government, that they could support a clean funding resolution to reopen the government. This government shutdown is hurting government workers, it's hurting the people in this country that need the services of this government, and it's hurting our economy. It's time to reopen the government and put people back to work.
I now want to recognize the ranking member of the Budget Committee, who has been working for the last 6... We want to do... All right, I'm going to recognize first then the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, who has been working very hard to get appropriation bills passed so that we did not have this government shutdown, so government workers would not be shut out of their workplace, and so the American people would be served by their government. Nita Lowey.
Thank you. It's very clear to all of us that the American people have had enough. The government shutdown is an abject failure of this Congress to do its job. It's having a severe impact on jobs, economic growth, services and investments that are critical to American families. Speaker Boehner should allow a vote on the clean Senate-passed bill to open the government. It would pass with Democratic and Republican votes, and President Obama would sign it into law, ending the shutdown today. The majority still doesn't understand that this shutdown serves no purpose, causes real pain to American families. If Speaker Boehner will not agree to hold a vote to reopen government, he is going to get support on the floor that will make him do so. That is why this discharge petition is so important. It gives Democrats and Republicans the chance to force a vote on bringing this ugly and embarrassing episode to a close. So I call on all my colleagues, let your voices be heard, sign the petition, let's open government. This is important for jobs, the economy, the American people in the future. Thank you.
I now want to recognize the ranking member of the Budget Committee, who has been working for the last 6 months to get a conference established so that we could discuss the issues which apparently, some have said, have led to the shutdown. He has also been working very hard to get a bill on the floor which would open the government now, put the people to work for the American public. Chris Van Hollen.
Thank you, Stanley. Thank you, Stanley. A majority of members of the House of Representatives, Democrats and Republicans alike, are on the public record saying that they want to vote to open the entire government now. Speaker Boehner has prevented us from having a vote in the House of Representatives. He has prevented democracy from working its will. In fact, on October 1st, they rigged the rules of the House in order to keep the government shut down. This is now an opportunity to use the rules of the House to allow democracy to work its will. We're calling on every member of Congress who has told their constituents that they want to vote to immediately open the government, that this is the time to show that they mean what they say. This is a chance to show here in Washington, D.C., that they mean what they're telling their constituents back home in their districts, which is they want to vote to open the government now. We know the votes are there. It's just now a matter of people keeping their word to their constituents and the American people. Let's get it done. Let's vote to open the government now.
I have in my hand the piece of legislation that Mr. Van Hollen wants to bring to the floor, and we can substitute opening government today. What it says is it's the Government Shutdown Prevention Act. If they meant that, they too will sign the petition that we are about to go into the House of Representatives. All of my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle sign this petition, get the government open, do it today. Questions?
Yeah, it sounds like you're not totally sure you're going to get enough Republican signatures here. What do you think is going to happen, and also what about the
Well, I think you're probably correct on the fact that we're not sure, because a lot of people have said they want the government open, but have refused to provide for a ways and means to get the government open. We could do it today. We ought to do it today. We're going to try to do it today.
Do you have any assurances from the leadership that if you get the signatures that they would allow you to move forward on Monday? There was some question about whether or not, given the rules, second and fourth Monday, that would be okay. Has that been established? Or
under the rules, we think we're have the
petition that's had 218 signatures has successfully been brought to the floor. The leadership recognizes they now have a majority of the House that seek that vote, and that's what we offer.
The answer to the question, as Mr. Miller just pointed out, we believe that it will be brought to the floor because a majority of the House members will have signed a petition wanting to bring it to the floor. If they do not, they will undermine the American people. We have talked to a number of Republicans who want to vote on a clean, open government bill now.
Just yesterday, and it was reported that Peter King indicated that if it had to come to a discharge petition, ultimately he would sign it. I would say today is the day to do it. Let's get it done. Why delay another day?
And there's some 20 to 25 Republicans who have been reported in the press, not to us, but in the press to the public, to their constituents, as saying they want to vote on a open government bill now. Thank you very much.
And no debt ceiling, nothing that addresses the debt ceiling right now, you guys?
Not in this bill.
And both chambers of Congress in session today here in the House in a vote working on the Farm Bill. Members in the House voting on which measures of the Farm Bill will be focused on in conference. Yesterday, the House voted in favor of going to conference to work out differences over this Farm Bill. And just some more information on the Farm Bill. This is from the Associated Press. This is some legislation that lawmakers from states with farming interests have been pushing for 2 years. It's a 5-year, roughly $500 billion piece of legislation, the Farm Bill. And it has been, of course, mired in all of these debates over spending. Again, that's from the Associated Press. And while we're in this vote, we're going to go ahead and take your phone calls. The numbers are up on your screen now. Got a number of people waiting on the line, but for those joining us via radio, C-SPAN radio, we'll let you know Republicans can call 202-585-3885. Democrats, 202-585-3886, and Independents and others, 202-585-3887. We're going to get to your calls right now. Richard is calling from Winslow, Arkansas, on the Republicans line. Hi, Richard. Thanks for waiting.
Well, thank you. First of all, a comment. I want to see the government shutdown ended, but I wish they'd call it a Republican government shutdown. I see both sides up there. I voted for Republicans, Democrats, Independents over the years. I seek out the right one I think fits my needs best. But anyway, I don't see how the Democrats can say they need to. They want to open the government up and then sit down and have discussions. Looks like they need to be sitting down, having discussions now, and try to come to some sort of bipartisan reasoning and open up the government. And one last thing, comment I have, when did President Obama become the president of the Democrats only and not the president of the people of the United States of America?
All right. Thanks, Richard. Going on now to Buchanan, Michigan. On the Democrats line, we have Linda.
Hi. Thank you.
You bet.
My name is Linda Burns Phillips, and I think you have an extreme group of the Tea Party. I heard Richard talking. You have an extreme group of the Tea Party people trying to hold the rest of America hostage. They are hurting our American people. The farmers are even hurting. They need their subsidy. It's just a shame what they are doing. And I think that they need to vote all of them out of there eventually, because President Obama has gave into their will time and again, and I'm glad he's standing strong. So let the Republicans mess themselves up, but it's really the extreme Tea Party people.
All right, Linda. Thanks. Kathy's next. She's calling from Douglas, Texas, on the Others and Independents line. Hi, Kathy.
How you doing? I am a single grandmother taking care of my 2 foster kids that were in foster care, and I need all the help I can get. We really need to have this government open so that people can survive. We are the people. We are the ones that voted y'all in. The same way we voted you in, we can vote you out. So I suggest that you open the government now. Thank you.
All right, Kathy there in Douglas, Texas. Pam is next on the line, Princess Anne, Maryland, for Republicans. Hi, Pam.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The problem is we have 2 parties that do not want to go to the table, as the Constitution states, to go ahead and resolve this problem. And there is a way out. If everybody will call their representatives, their congressmen, their senators, whoever they possibly can, and ask for a state convention that will override the Republicans, the Democrats, and the president. And maybe they can come to a conclusion and get this government moving again. The thing of it is, everybody's standing up there. Nobody wants to give anything. And it seems like Obamacare is the main stepping stone. If they would just have a state convention and resolve this problem with Obamacare, let the states, we're the people that live in the states, let the states speak. And after they speak, then we can go back to doing what we need to do. And maybe that would keep the Republicans, Democrats, and Independents back on course and get them to give and take. Because as long as Obamacare is on the table and nothing is really resolved with Obamacare, we're going to be shut down forever and ever. So please call whoever you need to call and ask for a state convention.
All right, Pam, thanks there. And she mentioned the parties coming together. Some information about that. Yesterday, of course, Republican senators met with President Obama at the White House. And in the Washington Post this morning, there was a little bit of an update on congressional Republicans rushing to develop a plan to reopen the government. Again, this is from the Washington Post today. Congressional Republicans worked yesterday to develop a new plan for reopening the government and avoiding the first ever default, crafting a strategy that can win the support of the White House before financial markets open on Monday. Talks on Capitol Hill became more urgent, the Washington Post reports, after President Obama rejected House Speaker John Boehner's offer to raise the debt limit through late November to give the parties time to negotiate a broader budget deal. You can see the rest of what the White House had to say yesterday for yourself. We had the White House briefing. You can watch all of that online, cspan.org. As we head back to your calls, Dan's calling from Tracy City, Tennessee on the Democrats line. Dan, what are your thoughts on the shutdown, day 12?
Hi, thank you for allowing me to express my opinion. Boehner and his group remind me of the school bully out on the playground with the only ball that says, if you don't play the game my way, I'm going to take my ball and leave. They can't accept the fact that Obamacare is law. It's been passed. It's gone through all of the channels. They might as well give up the fight against it and sit down and renegotiate things the way the government's supposed to operate. This is ridiculous. We need to get this government back up and running.
All right. Thanks, Dan. I want to let you know we're taking a few more minutes of your calls, try to get to a few more folks here on the line. And if you're joining us via radio, Republicans line again, 202-585-3885. Democrats, 202-585-3886. And independents and others, 202-585-3887. While the House is wrapping up this vote on one portion of the Farm Bill to move forward with this, let's go now to David in Luana, in Iowa. Sorry about that, David. You're on the independents line. Hi, go ahead.
I'm talking about this Farm Bill. They're taking food stamp money and giving it to the farmers. I live right next to a cornfield. I live in this little town. We have cornfields all the way around us. And they come in with airplanes and they spray, and it stinks so bad you got to come in the house because you can't stand to be outside. What is that stuff? And now they got helicopters dropping it, and they think that's going to stop at the fence line. It ain't. It's airborne, and we're just going in our lungs because nobody's telling us what kind of stuff it is.
Now, David, what are your thoughts on subsidies then for farmers and the food stamp program?
Well, like I told my wife, I said, when's the last time you seen a tractor, a corn picker, and a wagon going down the road? These combines you got around, you can't even pass them. I mean, they're so big. There ain't no small farmers no more. There's no family mom and pop farms. I used to milk cows for a living. That's how I raised my kids. And I did farm work. But we had a small farm. We didn't need this monster of a combine to pick our corn. Now, they got all this big equipment. What do they need to take the food out of the people that actually need food stamps? They take the food out of their mouth so they can drive their big combines.
All right. David, thanks there from Iowa. Kayla's on the line in New York, the Republicans line. Hi, Kayla.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I want to vote for the Republican because the government needs to open back up, basically, because us poor people, half of us poor people, it's not even our fault that we need assistance and stuff because of the fact it's the way our parents raised us. And if the government and that has such a problem about poor people, then they need to give an education class to show poor people how to survive because their parents don't.
Okay. Thanks, Kayla, for weighing in there. And Christopher calling from Seminole, Texas on the Democrats line. Christopher, the shutdown in day 12. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that the people that have been elected are not serving the people. They're serving themselves. They're feeling their own egos. The elected officials have to accept the fact that this country is going through a change. And the people of the country have to be represented, not those that are wealthy and those that feel like they can control everything. The majority has spoken, so everybody else needs to get on the boat and let's get on with business.
All right.
open the government. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christopher. And we're taking your calls. If you want to join us, though, in a different way, you can let us know what you're thinking via Twitter. Again, just use the hashtag C-SPAN chat. That way we can see what you've got to say on Twitter. We have some reaction coming now from news and media organizations. Bloomberg News says Chris Christie of New Jersey faults politicians who played chicken as government shutdown neared. And from Slate, MSNBC's Dave Weigel, he says 100 or so Tea Partiers were on the Capitol lawn ready to clean up the World War II memorial. He's got some pictures linked to his tweet. And again, send us your thoughts as well via Twitter. You can also log on to facebook.com/cspan and give us your thoughts there. Scott's on the line from Dyer, Arkansas for The Independent.
Yes, I just want everybody to look behind where the speaker is seated. It says, "In God We Trust." I don't really know if they really believe that anymore. This thing has trickled down from the top, and it's filtered down through the Congress about turning this nation into a socialist nation. We don't want that. The people of America want a "In God We Trust" nation built. It was built by God, under God, and through God, and we need to get back to our roots. All of this stuff that's getting thrown and shoved down our throats, we don't want it. The Tea Party is trying to get America to realize that we have got to get back to our roots. I don't totally agree with how it's happened, but we have got to get back and get to praying to God, because this thing is fixing to wind down, and Jesus is fixing to come back, and he's coming back for a people that are true to him and who love his people, Israel.
Now, Scott, if they followed that, in your opinion, which way would they be going with this shutdown?
They're going to come together, and they're going to realize that they have to put God first, and then when they do that, the blessings will come back to this nation, jobs will be formed, resources will be used that they haven't even thought of, because God will give them the revelation. We will get back to how it used to be. Like people are calling in that, you cannot all get on the bandwagon. What happens if the bandwagon is going to hell? You got to stand up and say enough is enough. This insurance that he's trying to poke down our throat.
The health care law?
Yes, ma'am. It is way too expensive for the people that have gotten through. I tried to get my wife on yesterday. I couldn't get through. There's got to be something with that. He's trying to keep people from really seeing how expensive this is until all this goes away, and he bullies the House Speaker Boehner into caving in and going ahead and passing this budget and keeping his insurance thing going, and then the lines will be open, and then people will really see that they're going to be paying way more than what they're paying.
Okay.
This is all just a cover screen.
Got it, Scott. Thanks so much. And let's move on so we can get a couple more calls in here. Mark's calling from Alamogordo, New Mexico. Mark, you're on the Republican line. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. I think what's happened is our representatives in Washington have forgotten that they're there to represent us, not for us to represent them. They have set themselves up as an elitist group that doesn't care about the American people. A couple of years ago, they tried to ram a program down our throat. It was called NSPS. That program was a paper for performance program for federal workers. They are federal workers also. And if they were to come under that program, they wouldn't be getting paid, just like a lot of federal workers aren't getting paid right now. I think what we need to do is stop playing this game with the American people and represent them the way they're supposed to.
All right. Thanks, Mark. William's calling, Warren, Michigan, on the Democrats line. Go ahead, William. You're on the air.
Yeah, thank you for answering my call. I'm a Korean veteran. I truly did not serve in the Korean War that I might sit in a park while millions of people are suffering with all kinds of conditions. I'd like to tell Speaker Boehner to get off the pot. And let's get this thing on the road. We're not going backwards. We done lived in the country days when we had horse and wagons and buggies and all this sort of stuff, but we got to move on. Our economy needs to be developed. We got roads and every other condition that needs to be took care of. Stop playing games. Let's move on. You cannot go back. Thank you for letting me speak to that.
Thank you, William. Linda is next from New Albany, Ohio, on the Independence line.
Thank you for taking my call. What I want to say this morning is that I am appalled at the incendiary rhetoric.
The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is to vote on the motion to instruct on H.R. 2642, offered by the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Peterson, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. Clerk will designate the motion.
Motion to instruct conferees on H.R. 2642, offered by Mr. Peterson of Minnesota.
Question is on the motion to instruct. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
And sorry for our last caller there. Linda was calling from New Albany. We had to cut her off because the House came back here onto the floor, again working to proceed on a number of bills today. They've been taking up piecemeal funding for the federal government. For those callers who are still on the line, I want to let you know you can go ahead and get in touch with C-SPAN. Let us know your thoughts via Twitter and also on Facebook. And as we're in this vote, want to let you know there's an article today talking about a trio of Senate Republicans pushing a plan to reopen the government for 6 months to extend the debt ceiling until January 31st next year and make some reforms to Obamacare. Those 3 senators are Susan Collins, Republican of Maine, Kelly Ayotte from New Hampshire, and Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. Now, this latest move would delay the medical device tax for 2 years and create an income verification program under the Affordable Care Act to make sure that only eligible people receive subsidies on those insurance exchanges that opened a couple weeks ago. Again, in a vote here on the House floor, over in the Senate, they've just gavelled in, and they're going to be working on shutdown and debt ceiling bills as well. And you can go ahead and watch the Senate's action on our companion network, C-SPAN 2, as we stay here and watch the action on the House floor.
On this vote, the yeas are 195, the nays are 204, with 2 voting present. The motion is not adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the chair appoints the following conferees on H.R. 2642.
From the Committee on Agriculture for consideration of the House Amendment and the Senate Amendment and modifications committed to conference. Messrs. Lucas, King of Iowa, Nagelbauer, Rogers of Alabama, Conaway, Thompson of Pennsylvania, Austin Scott of Georgia, Crawford, Mrs. Roby, Mrs. Nome, Messrs. Denham, Rodney Davis of Illinois, Peterson, McIntyre, Costa, Wall, Schrader, McGovern, Ms. Dalbene, Mrs. Negretti-McLeod, and Mr. Vila. From the Committee on Foreign Affairs for consideration of Title III of the House Amendment and Title III of the Senate Amendment and modifications committed to the conference, Messrs. Royce, Marino, and Engel. From the Committee on Ways and Means for consideration of Sections 1207 and 1301 of the House Amendment and Sections 1301, 1412, 1435, and 4204 of the Senate Amendment and modifications committed to conference, Messrs. Camp, Sam Johnson of Texas, and Mr. Levin. For consideration of the House Amendment and the Senate Amendments and modifications committed to conference, Mr. Sutherland and Ms. Fudge.
The House will be in order. Members will take their conversations from the well and take their conversations from the floor of the House. For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 4 of Rule 22, I move that the House take from the Speaker's table the Senate amendment to the House Joint Resolution 59, recede from its amendment, and concur in the Senate amendment to open the government now.
Under Section 2 of House Resolution 368, that motion may be offered only by the Majority Leader or his designee.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker.
may state his parliamentary inquiry.
The standing rule of the House is Rule 22, Clause 4. Is that correct?
That is correct. And
The standing rule of the House reads, Mr. Speaker, when the stage of disagreement has been reached on a bill or a resolution with House or Senate amendments, a motion to dispose of any amendment shall be privileged. Mr. Speaker, my question is this parliamentary status of the bill, does it meet the requirements of 22-4?
The House has altered that operation of that standing rule.
So I just want to understand, Mr. Speaker, this standing rule of the House, which I have here, has been altered by the House. Is that what the Speaker is saying?
The House adopted a resolution altering.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker. When was that alteration made?
House Resolution 368.
House Resolution 368. Mr. Speaker, just parliamentary inquiry. I want to make sure I have the right one. I have in my hand H.Res. 368, October 1st, resolved, and Section 2 of that says any motion pursuant to Clause 4 of Rule 22 relating to the House Joint Resolution may be offered only by the Majority Leader or his designee. Is that what you're referring to, Mr. Speaker?
That is the resolution.
So, Mr. Speaker, just so I understand the situation, parliamentary inquiry. H.Res. 368 changed the standing rules of the House to take away from any member of the House the privilege of calling up the Senate bill to immediately reopen the government. Is that right?
It did change the operation of the standing rule.
Right. So, just parliamentary inquiry, a privileged motion, Mr. Speaker, would have allowed any member of this House, Republican or Democrat, to call up the Senate bill to open the government. Is that right?
The chair did not give an advisory opinion on that.
But, Mr. Speaker, a privileged resolution, as cited in Rule 22-4, the standing rules of the House, would allow any member of the House to offer that resolution. Is that right?
The chair will not give an advisory opinion.
Well, Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry, I think you, just as I understood, said that that was changed so that it no longer would be a privileged motion for any member, but it would be exclusively the right of the Republican leader or his designee. Am I right about that?
The House will follow House Resolution 368.
Right. And just again, Mr. Speaker, I want to be absolutely clear that H.Res. 368 changed the standing rules of the House so that only the Republican leader or his designee could call to open the government.
The gentleman will state his parliamentary inquiry.
Parliamentary inquiry. Parliamentary inquiry. Is the majority leader or his designee? I would ask my colleagues whether the majority leader or his designee is on the floor of the House today.
The gentleman will address
parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker. This rule,
the chair
which
is
amended my parliamentary inquiry, and this will be my last one. I just want to understand, Mr. Speaker. The Rules Committee, under the rules of the House, changed the standing rules of the House to take away the right of any member to move to vote to open the government, and gave that right exclusively to the Republican leader. Is that right?
The House adopted that resolution. The chair is now prepared to entertain 1 minute.
I make my motion, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion that under the regular standing rules of the House, Clause 4, Rule 22, that the House take up the Senate amendments and open the government now.
Under Section 2 of House Resolution 368, that motion may be offered only by the majority leader or his designate.
Mr. Speaker, why were the rules rigged to keep the government shut down?
The gentleman will suspend.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think
the chair will now entertain.
Democracy has been suspended.
The gentleman will suspend. The House will now entertain unanimous consent requests for 1 minute speeches. Does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend. And Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
Fine. Understood. The House will be in order. Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in October of 2009, the Obama administration reversed the policies of both President Clinton and President Bush by committing the United States to UN arms treaty negotiations. Since then, members of the House and Senate have voiced their strong opposition. I joined 130 of my colleagues in sending a letter to the White House to express my concern about the dangers posed to American Second Amendment rights. In the Senate, which must ultimately approve the treaty by a two-thirds vote, a bipartisan coalition of senators remains united in opposition to its ratification. Despite overwhelming opposition from Congress and the American people, Secretary of State John Kerry signed the treaty, a decision that is sure to have far-reaching consequences for American foreign policy and American sovereignty. Now, I've joined my colleagues in the House in sending another letter to the administration voicing our continued opposition to this misguided and dangerous policy. I encourage my colleagues in the Senate to stand strong in their opposition, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Over here, 186 Democrats this morning signed a petition to end the Republican shutdown and routinely continue to fund the government through November 15th while we work out our differences. We need only 32 more signatures. I expect every Democrat to sign. Will some on the other side of the aisle cross over, reopen the government, go back to regular order, and negotiate our differences without a shutdown government, without threatening to default on the United States of America. Earlier, we tried to bring up a bill that would do that under unanimous consent, but the Republicans changed the rules of the House. After more than 200 years, they changed the rules to say, no, we couldn't bring that bill up. We cannot have a vote on continuing to run the government. Now, man up. Man up over there. Give us a vote. If you've got the votes, then you can keep the government shut down. If we've got the votes, we go back to routinely funding a continuing resolution for the government until November 15th. I think that would be a service to the American people. It's time for you people to stop.
The gentleman will suspend. The gentleman will suspend. The gentleman will suspend. The gentleman will suspend.
Ledger to me.
The gentleman will suspend. What purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise?
I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute. Remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Ernie Blankenship lived a life of service to his faith, his family, his country, and his community. It was a pleasure to help Ernie and Rita celebrate their 50th anniversary last year, as it was to see him on Sunday morning at St. Mary Church. Ernie passed away earlier this week, a loss that will be felt not only by his family, but throughout southern Ohio. Ernie served his country in the Army, played minor league baseball, and earned degrees from the University of Cincinnati and Xavier University. He coached youth sports teams and enjoyed a broadcasting career that spanned over 50 years. Earlier this year, Ernie retired as the Senior Vice President of NCB Savings Bank in Hillsborough. Ernie touched all of our lives in countless ways. He will continue to touch our lives and the lives of many young men and women through the scholarship that bears his name. Ernie Blankenship's legacy will continue through his children and grandchildren who learn firsthand his lessons on a life of humble service, faith, and patriotism. It's been a true honor to know Ernie and to represent him in Congress. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, shutting down this House for the next 2 days after shutting down the government is truly an act of great irresponsibility. The threat to the security of our families grows with each hour of the government shutdown and with each hour that we approach an historic breach of the full faith and credit of the United States. One economic expert after another tells us that to move into this uncharted water, this economic calamity, that the results and consequences for our families, for our economy, for our standing in the world are jeopardized. We have two ways to avoid this. One is, as any member, to call up the Senate resolution to continue operations of the government, and Republicans have blocked that with a special rule that gives that power only to Eric Cantor, the Republican leader. The second is why you see so many members wearing these stickers is to sign a petition to open the government. We have done that,
Gentleman's time's expired.
reaching almost 200 members of this House. If only a few Republicans will join us, the government will open
Gentleman's
up.
time's
Thank
expired.
you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the President says Obamacare should not be part of any negotiations to fund the government or raise the debt limit. But my constituents in Kentucky recognize the President's health care law for what it actually is, a massive increase in federal spending. Its projected cost has more than doubled since President originally claimed it would reduce the deficit. It will cost American taxpayers $2 trillion over the next decade, and its true cost will continue to grow. Obamacare was rammed through Congress on a partisan basis through a process specifically reserved for budget-related bills. So for anyone to suggest that Obamacare should be left out of budget discussions in Washington is both cynical and inconsistent with Congress's ongoing responsibility to constantly scrutinize federal spending. After racking up $7 trillion in debt in just 5 years, the President stubbornly refuses to negotiate over Obamacare. But make no mistake, Mr. Speaker, Congress would not be doing its job if it ignored Obamacare and its massive costs in the ongoing debate about how to save America from bankruptcy. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent, Mr. Speaker, to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad that the Republican leadership pulled H.J. Res. 80 from further consideration today. This is the American Indian and Alaska Native Health Education and Safety Act. The Affordable Care Act, which the Republicans are demanding be eliminated in exchange for allowing the government to reopen, includes the permanent reauthorization of the Indian Health Care Improvement Act. As the author of the reauthorization of the Indian Health Care Improvement Act, I know the challenges that the reauthorization faced and just how long it took for us to finally get it passed into law. A decade, in case you're wondering. If we yield to Republican hostage-taking and throw out the Affordable Care Act, we throw out the reauthorization of the Indian Health Care Improvement Act, and that would be devastating to Indian country. This bill H.J. Res. 80 continues the damaging sequester cuts that the National Congress of American Indians have said pose particular hardship for Indian country and the surrounding communities who rely on tribes as employers. Mr. Speaker, it's time for us to stop this nonsense. If you truly do believe in the sacred trust responsibility our government has to tribes, then let's have a vote on a clean CR and reopen the government.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise the consent.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, my neighbors can't understand how we could actually recess today with so much work left to do. In 2012, businesses in my district were approved for $391,000 in Small Business Administration loans per day. That's the most of any district in Illinois, yet 0 SBA loans have been approved in the last 12 days because our government is immediately shut down. Acme Design in Elgin, Illinois was founded by Clint Barucki and has been a part of our community since 1992. Clint has 10 employees and has designed and manufactured models for advertising, businesses, and government. Now, an important project for his business is on hold because a military contractor is unable to move forward during the Republican government shutdown. Last Monday in Schaumburg, I spoke with federal employees who served their country and played by the rules. These middle-class Americans who live paycheck to paycheck are being punished for our inability to fund the government. And at Church of the Holy Spirit Food Pantry in Schaumburg, they told me that they will be unable to fill the gap the government shutdown has left for families in need in my district. My neighbors can't understand how we could recess for 2 days while this Republican government shutdown remains in effect. Let's stay in session, get to work for the people we serve, and reopen the government. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, why did our Republican colleagues shut down the government? Why don't our Republican colleagues allow the United States to pay its bills? House Democrats want to open the government and have the country pay its bills. Senate Democrats want the same. Even Senate Republicans want to open the government and pay its bills, but not House Republicans. Remember when you were in school, Mr. Speaker, and we learned how a bill becomes a law? One of the tenets of this great nation is that majority rules. Put the Senate CR on the floor, Mr. Speaker. Let a majority of the House make a decision. Why is democracy being thwarted by the Republican majority? Pass the CR. The American people are tired of these political games. We have the votes here to pass a clean CR and open the government again. If the Republican leadership allowed that bill to come to the floor, we could do it today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from American Samoa seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, not only is the word redskin inappropriate, but just plain offensive, and it's a derogatory term towards the American Indians. And I want to share with my colleagues and the 181 million football fans all over America how the word redskin came about. In 1749, it was a standard procedure among the colonial settlers who lived in what is now Maine and Nova Scotia to kill and to scalp as many of the Indians as members of the Mi'kmaq tribe. And the same policy was also implemented in 1755 by settlers who lived in what is now known as the state of Massachusetts. And their objective was to kill and scalp members of the Penobscot Indian Nation. Mr. Speaker, the colonial policy was you get paid. You get paid for killing and scalping Native American Indians. And if you kill an Indian boy, you get paid 50 pounds. And if you get a scalp, that's an additional 40 pounds. And not only is it to the men, but for the women and children are also scalped and killed, and you get paid for it. Mr. Speaker, I submit that these scalps were called redskins. And Native Americans are human beings, Mr. Speaker. They are not animals. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the Republican side of the House has put out everything that the other side wants except for what America doesn't want, and that's Obamacare. Instead, people are going to be railroaded into a program that fines them for buying a product that they don't want or not buying a product that they don't want from a website that doesn't work. Is this America, or is this something a whole lot different? Because choices are being taken away, people are being forced into a program they don't want. That's why our side fights for liberty, fights for the choice of determining their own health care system, their own health care plan. So would my colleagues on the other side of the aisle please join us in putting out what we need to do to get done, since we agree on almost everything in the CR except for the continued forcing of people into the Obamacare program. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.